Israel was no longer the same. Asterisk, the people who had once been delivered with a mighty hand, who crossed the sea, who witnessed the impossible with their own eyes, were now living as if none of it had ever happened. Asterisk, and maybe this is one of the most dangerous things that can happen to someone. It's not completely forgetting God, it's remembering, and still choosing to ignore him. Asterisk, at that time, the throne of Israel was occupied by a man named Ahab. Asterisk, a spiritually weak king, influenced by something even more dangerous. Asterisk, his wife, Jezebel, was not just a foreign queen. Asterisk, she brought with her a culture, a religion, an entire system of worship that directly confronted everything Israel had received from God. Baal was not just an idol. He was an organized lie. Asterisk, a false god of rain, fertility, and prosperity. A convenient substitute for a people who no longer wanted to depend on God. And little by little, without urgency, without resistance, the people began to bow. Asterisk, not all at once, but day after day. Asterisk, small compromises, small deviations. Asterisk, until, when they finally noticed, they no longer knew who they were. Asterisk, the altars of the Lord were being abandoned. Asterisk, the prophets were being persecuted, and the truth was being silenced. But here is something important. God never leaves a generation without a voice. When everything seems lost, when truth seems erased, when no one stands up, asterisk, it is exactly when he chooses someone, not a king, not someone important in human eyes, but someone willing. And in that heavy, silent, spiritually suffocating atmosphere, a man appeared. No announcement, no recorded history. No public preparation. He simply showed up. His name was Elijah, a man from Tishbe, a simple and almost forgotten place. Asterisk, and that alone says a lot. Asterisk, because God was not looking for someone popular. Asterisk, he was looking for someone faithful. Asterisk, Elijah didn't come with a beautiful speech. Asterisk, he came with a declaration that cut through every doubt. Asterisk, a sentence that didn't just confront the king, but challenged an entire nation. And before anyone could question his authority, before anyone could ignore him, he declared something that would completely change the course of history. A drought, no rain, no life, no Baal, no excuses. Asterisk, and in that moment, without a sword, without an army, without a position, one man stood before a king and before an entire nation that had turned away from God. Now tell me, what makes someone have that kind of courage? It wasn't human boldness. It was conviction. Asterisk, because when someone truly knows who God is, it doesn't matter who stands in front of them. Asterisk, and this is where the story begins to gain real strength, because speaking is one thing, but sustaining the word that was released is something completely different. Asterisk, and what happens next is not about public confrontation yet. Asterisk, it's about something almost no one sees. The secret place. There was no warning, no preparation. Elijah simply appeared and spoke. Standing before King Ahab. He did not ask for permission, did not try to negotiate, did not soften the message. He declared a sentence, not based on politics, not based on emotion, but on the authority of God. As the Lord, a God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years, except at my word. Silence, for a moment. Maybe no one understood the weight of those words. Because this was not just a statement about the weather. It was a direct attack against Baal. The god Israel was worshiping, was known for exactly that. Rain fertility. Harvest. Elijah was not just announcing a drought, he was exposing a lie. It was as if he was saying, let's see who truly has power. Now think about this. You walk into the king's palace in a corrupted nation where prophets are being killed, and you simply declare something like that. That's not normal. That's not ordinary courage. That is someone who knows who is behind their voice. And before any reaction could happen. Before the king could order his arrest. Before Jezebel could act, Elijah disappears. Because God doesn't just raise someone up, he also protects them. The Lord gives a clear direction. Elijah had to leave immediately. This was not the time for public confrontation yet. This was the time to be prepared in secret. And maybe this challenges a lot of people today. Because everyone wants Mount Carmel, but few accept the brook Cherith. Before fire could fall from heaven, Elijah needed to learn something essential: total dependence. No resources, no audience, no recognition. Just him and him, God. So he goes to an isolated place, hidden, almost forgotten. A brook, Cherith. There, where no one applauded him. Where no one saw him. Where no one knew what was happening. God begins to teach something deep, because sustaining a public word, requires a private life aligned, and it is in that place, far from people's eyes, far from noise, far from approval, that the impossible begins to happen silently. While the nation faced drought, Elijah began to experience provision, but not in the way anyone would expect. And what happens next, will not only reveal God's care, but will also break every human logic. The place God chose for Elijah was not comfortable. It was not strategic in human eyes. It was not a place of growth, visibility. It was a hiding place, a brook called Cherith. There were no crowds, no recognition, no stage. There was only one thing: dependence. And maybe that is exactly what God wanted to teach. Because it is easy to trust when everything is working. But what about when there are no guarantees? Elijah had released a powerful word, but now he had to live what he declared. Without rain, there was no harvest. Without harvest, There was no food. Without food, there was no survival, including for him. But God gives a promise. Strange at first, he would be sustained there. Now think about this. It was not a logical plan. It was not predictable. It was supernatural. Every day, consistently, God sent food to Elijah through ravens. Yes, ravens, birds considered unclean in that culture, animals that naturally do not share food. Asterisk, and yet, every day, asterisk, morning and evening, Elijah was fed. No failure, no delay, no human explanation. Asterisk, now tell me, asterisk, what do you do when God uses something unlikely to take care of you? Do you question or do you learn to trust? Because God is not limited by human logic. He can use the unlikely, the unexpected, the unseen to sustain those who trust him. And while the world outside began to feel the weight of the drought, Elijah was living a daily miracle. Small, silent, consistent. But there comes a moment when even what seemed secure begins to change. Asterisk, the brook starts to dry. Up, the water decreases day after day until it is gone. And there is something deep here. It was God who sent Elijah to that place. It was God who sustained him there. Asterisk, but now, the very scenario changes. Asterisk, because God does not want our faith to be in the place, or in the method, or even in the provision itself, but in him. And when the brook dries up, God speaks again, and now the direction seems even more unlikely. Asterisk, he had to go to Zarephath, a city outside Israel, in foreign territory, among people who did not serve the God of Israel. And there, a widow would sustain him. Think about that. Asterisk, a widow, in a time of drought, in a land in crisis. Asterisk would be the source of provision. It makes no sense. But God does not work based on what makes sense. Asterisk, he works based on purpose. Asterisk, and when Elijah arrives, he finds exactly what God said. A woman gathering sticks, no resources, no hope, preparing her last meal before accepting death. Asterisk, and in that moment, asterisk once again, God challenges not only Elijah, but also that woman. Asterisk, because the miracle that is about to happen does not begin with abundance. It begins with obedience. The time of hiding had ended. Asterisk, after a long period being sustained in secret, the moment comes when God completely changes the direction of Elijah. Asterisk, now it was no longer about survival. It was about confrontation. God tells Elijah to go back to where he was rejected, back to the center of the problem, back to face Ahab again. Asterisk, and when that meeting happens, the atmosphere is heavy. Ahab looks at Elijah and says, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" But Elijah does not back down. He responds firmly, asterisk, I have not troubled Israel, but you and your father's house have, because you have abandoned the commandments of the Lord and followed Baal. Asterisk, this was not just a political conflict. It was spiritual. And Elijah proposes something that would change everything. A meeting, asterisk, not in secret, not in private, but before all the people, on Mount Carmel, a high place, visible where nothing could be manipulated. Asterisk there, two realities would collide. On one side, Elijah alone. On the other, 450 prophets of Baal. A crowd gathered. A divided people. A watching king. A heavy tension in the air. Elijah steps forward and says, "How long will you waver between two opinions?" Silence, because this was not just a question. It was an exposure. They knew God, but lived as if they did not, trying to balance faith and idolatry, truth and lies, God and Baal. Elijah continues, "If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." Simple, direct, no middle ground. But the people said nothing. Then the challenge begins. 2 altars. 2 sacrifices. No fire. The true God would answer with fire. The prophets of Baal go first. They cry out, shout, dance, cut themselves, doing everything to get attention from a God who does not respond. Hours pass, nothing happens. And then Elijah mocks them. Shout louder. Maybe he is sleeping, or busy, or traveling. As if saying, if he is God, why doesn't he answer? But the truth is simple. There was no response. Because there was no God there, now it is Elijah's turn. Instead of a spectacle, he rebuilds the altar of the Lord, stone by stone, restoring what was broken, abandoned, forgotten. Before fire falls, the altar must be restored. Then he prepares the sacrifice and pours water once, twice, 3 times, until everything is completely soaked. The altar, the sacrifice, and even the trench around it. Now there is no doubt. If anything happens here, there will be no human explanation. Then Elijah prays. No shouting, no panic, no performance. Just a simple, direct, aligned prayer, asking God to reveal himself, and that the people would know who the true God is. And this is where the impossible happens. Elijah's prayer was not long. It was not filled with complex words. It was not a performance to impress people. It was direct, simple, and full of conviction. He was not trying to convince God to act. He knew who God was. And then it happens. Without warning, without build-up, without visible process. Fire falls, but not only on the sacrifice. The Bible makes it clear. The fire consumes everything. The sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the dust, and it even licks up the water around it. Nothing remains. No doubt. No logic. No coincidence. It was God, responding so clearly that no one could deny it. Now look at the reaction of the people. The same people who moments before were silent, undecided, divided, now fall on their faces, and they declare, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. Do you see it? They always knew, but they needed to see to decide. And here is a powerful truth. When God reveals himself, neutrality does not exist. You either surrender or you resist, but standing in the middle is no longer an option. The confrontation ends, but the consequences begin. Elijah then orders the prophets of Baal to be taken and executed. It may sound harsh today, but in that context, It represented judgment over a system that had corrupted the nation and led people away from God. This was not only a spiritual moment, it was also a restoration of order. Now, with the altar restored and the people aligned again, something was still missing. Rain, because the word spoken at the beginning was still in effect. And here something interesting happens. After one of the greatest visible miracles, Elijah returns to something invisible. He goes up the mountain and prays. He bows down, putting his face between his knees, and begins to persist. It is not a single prayer. It is perseverance. He sends his servant to look at the sky. Once, nothing. Twice, nothing. 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Nothing. Now think about this. The man who just saw fire fall from heaven now has to face a closed sky. And that teaches something powerful. Past experiences with God do not replace present dependence. The 7th time, the servant returns with a different report. I see a small cloud, the size of a man's hand. Small, almost insignificant, but enough, because when God starts something, size does not matter. Elijah immediately understands. He tells Ahab to prepare, because the rain is coming. And suddenly, the sky fills with dark clouds, the wind blows, and the rain falls, strong, abundant, restoring. After so long, the drought ends. But what comes next? No one expected. Because after the greatest moment of victory comes one of Elijah's most human moments. After everything that had happened, one would naturally think everything would now change. The people saw the fire. The people recognized. God, the rain returned. It was the turning point. But things do not always happen as we expect. When Jezebel learned everything Elijah had done, especially regarding the prophets of Baal, she did not repent, did not step back, did not reflect. She threatened him, and not just any threat. She sent word that within 24 hours, Elijah would be dead. Now think about that. Man who faced 450 prophets. The man who saw fire. Fall from heaven. The man who prayed and saw rain. Return. Now he is afraid. He runs. This is not weakness. This is humanity. And maybe this is one of the most important parts of the entire story. Because we often think that those who experience great things with God do not feel fear, do not get tired, do not break. But Elijah shows the opposite. He walks through the desert, alone, exhausted, emotionally drained. And at one point he simply stops, sits down, and makes a shocking request. He asks to die. It is enough, Lord. Take my life. It was not lack of faith. It was exhaustion. It was overload. It was a heart that had gone too far without stopping to breathe. And here is what is most powerful. God does not rebuke Elijah. God does not say, "Where is your faith now?" God takes care of him. First, the physical. An angel touches him. He sleeps. He wakes up and finds food. He eats and sleeps again. God does not begin with the spiritual. He begins with the human. Because sometimes what looks like a spiritual crisis is just exhaustion. Asterisk after that, strengthened. Elijah travels to Mount Horeb. Asterisk, the same place where God had revealed himself to Moses years earlier. A place of encounter. There God speaks. Asterisk, what are you doing here, Elijah? Not a question of ignorance, but an invitation to reflection. Asterisk, Elijah responds. He opens his heart. He speaks of pain, fear, loneliness, the feeling of being alone, the sense that everything had been in vain. Asterisk, then God tells him to stand on the mountain. Asterisk, and something begins to happen. Asterisk, a strong wind passes, breaking rocks. But God was not in the wind. Then an earthquake. But God was not in the earthquake. Then fire. But God was not in the fire. And then a whisper, a gentle voice, asterisk almost, imperceptible. And there God was. It breaks every expectation. Asterisk, because the same God who answered with fire on Mount Carmel now speaks in silence. Asterisk, because God does not reveal himself in only one way. Asterisk, and sometimes what a weary soul needs is not more noise, it is peace. And in that moment Elijah understands. He was not alone. He never was. And God still had plans. And what comes next shows that Elijah's story was not over. In fact, it was far from it. After that encounter on Mount Horeb, something changed within Elijah. He did not leave there only strengthened. He left repositioned, because now he understands something essential. God was never absent. Not in the fire, not in the wind, not in the earthquake, not even in the silence. And even when Elijah thought he was alone, God had already prepared a new path for him. Loneliness was not the end. It was transition. God then redirects him back to his purpose. He must return. Return to work. Return to mission. Return to the movement of history. And here is something powerful. After moments of exhaustion, God does not end the journey. He redirects it. Elijah receives a clear mission to anoint kings and raise a successor. And this is where Elisha appears. Someone who would walk beside him and continue what God had begun through his life. This reveals something deep. No one is irreplaceable in God's mission, but everyone is unique in their time. Elijah was not the end of the story. He was part of it. And time passes until one of the most mysterious and powerful moments in all Scripture arrives. No common death, no sickness, no traditional farewell. Elijah is taken. A whirlwind appears, and a chariot of fire separates Elijah from Elisha. And then he ascends, not as someone defeated, but as someone who fulfilled his purpose. Now, think about this. The same man who appeared out of nowhere before kings. The same who confronted an entire nation. The same who challenged idols. The same who broke down in the desert. Does not end on earth. Like others. He is taken by God. And this is not about status. It is about purpose. Elijah's life teaches that God raises ordinary people to live extraordinary things, but also shows that even the greatest prophets are human, limited, tired, and dependent on grace. He had moments of courage, and moments of fear, moments of fire, and moments of silence, moments of victory, and moments of exhaustion. And yet, he remained in God's plan, because it is not about never falling. It is about staying guided. And when everything ends, one question still echoes. If God called you like he called Elijah, would you go? And deeper still, would you remain, even when everything feels silent? See you in the next video.